Tery Tucker, welcome.
Francisco, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Good to have you, man. Terry, you've had a very interesting life journey. You've been a coach, businessman, a SWAT negotiator. You've battled terminal cancer, and now you're an author as well as a public speaker. Through your experiences, you've become, I think, a very eloquent speaker on topics such as mindset and motivation. And you've come up with four wonderful truths on how to live an extraordinary life. What are those four truths and what's the story behind them?
Yeah, well, let me answer the last question first. I was
Yeah.
on a podcast called My Three Truths. And I thought, well, I really I take podcasting very seriously. So I want to do a good job as a guest. So I was like, I need to come up with these. What's foundational for me? What's my bedrock? And so I came up with the three truths. And then the more I read, the more I grow, the more I mature. I added a fourth one. As human beings, we like things in threes, but I just felt this fourth one was so important. And I have these four truths on a post-it note right here in my office. So I see them multiple times during the day and they constantly get reinforced in my mind. And they're just one sentence each. So here's the first one. Control your mind or your mind is going to control you. Number
Right.
two, embrace the pain and difficulty that we all experience in life and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. This third one, this is the one that I added to it, and I look at it more as kind of a legacy type of truth, and it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the
Mm.
last one I think is pretty self explanatory. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I refer to these four truths kind of as the bedrock of my soul. I think they're just a good place to start to build a quality life from.
No, I think you're right. I like them, all four of them. So why don't we start with the first one? Control your mind so it doesn't control you. Um, I can't help to think if someone is a very low agency individual, that succumbs to his or her impulses, what can they do to slowly start regaining control of their mind?
Yeah, and it really comes down to what you focus on. So let me give you a story. I went to a military college in South Carolina here in the United States. And one year we had a president by the name of James Stockdale. And Stockdale had been a naval aviator during the Vietnam War back in the 1960s and 70s and was actually shot down on a bombing run and spent 8 years as a prisoner of war. And I remember being in an event where somebody asked him, who were the people that survived that ugliness, that brutality, that torture? And he said, well, let me tell you the people who didn't survive. He said it wasn't the big, strong, tough guys who thought that they could handle any kind of abuse or torture. And then the next thing he said really surprised me. He said the other group that didn't survive were the optimists. He said these were the guys who thought that they would be rescued or released by Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter. And he said when Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter would come and go and they wouldn't be rescued, he said those guys died of a broken heart. He said the people that survived were the people who understood what they could control, which according to him were basically the thoughts in our mind and the breathing in our lungs. Everything else was at the discretion of the enemy, and controlled it. And I think that's where we all get in trouble. We try to control all these things that are going on around us, many
Right.
of which, or most of which, we have no control over. And so, what I like to recommend for people to do is, if you're in that situation, if something's really bothering you and you're kind of all over the place, take a piece of paper and write down every single thing that's bothering you. Get it all out
Mhm.
on a piece of paper, and then look at that piece of paper and cross out everything that you have no control over. And whatever's left on that paper is something that you can focus on to make whatever issue, problem, or your life in general better.
Nice, nice. I like that. And when you were younger, because you obviously done this now, but what is a mindset frame after you've done this exercise in your adult life that you wish you had when you were younger?
I think what I wish I would have known when I was younger is just how much more powerful, how much more resilient I am as a human being. There's a great another. I'm going to tell you another story. Happened back in the 1950s at Johns Hopkins University here in the United States. There was a professor who was doing an experiment with rats, and he wanted to see how long the average rat could tread water. And so he put these rats in a tank of water that was over their head. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as those rats were getting ready to sink and drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, and dried them off. And he let them rest for a while. And then he put those exact same rats back in that exact same tank of water.
Okay.
And the second time around, on average, those rats treaded water for 60 hours. Now think about
Wow.
it. The first time, 15 minutes. It's not like you're going to flunk a test or your business is going to fail or your marriage is going to go under. You're going to die. And the
Yeah.
second time, 60 hours, which taught me two things. Number one, the importance of hope in our lives, that if we know we're doing the right thing, maybe not today, maybe not this month, maybe not even this year, but there's a good chance, nothing's 100%, that you're going to get to where you want to be. And the second thing it taught me was just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought they could. We quit, we give up, we give in long before our bodies do. And I'm going to bring this back to the, control your mind, because our brains tell us this hurts, this is uncomfortable, stop it. And we do. You don't have to stop. You can push through that pain.
Wow, wow, what a story. It reminds me kind of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, where the only people who survived Auschwitz were the ones that had that mindset and the ones that they had something to look forward, they had a purpose, and they were stronger beyond anything they thought capable of. They were literally starving, and they survived for months and months. So wow,
Yeah,
that's a very powerful
I
frame.
remember Frankel talked about how, yeah, exactly what you said. If you lose your meaning or your will to live, he said, you'll rarely get it back.
Yeah.
So, you can't, you can, I guess, do it, because a lot of people did just give up and die in Auschwitz and the other camps. But if you can keep that, if you can just put one foot in front of the other every day, it's not sometimes pretty, it's not sexy, but you know what? It works for a lot of people if you can just keep moving forward.
Right, one step at a time. All right, number two, embrace the pain and difficulty and use it to make it stronger and more determined individual. This sounds very counterintuitive for most people, I would assume, but it's such a true statement because the pain is catalyst for growth. Nothing good happens when you're happy and jolly, it just remains stagnant. So only when you are in pain, you get the motivation to push forward. Now, why do you think most people run away from pain instead of towards it? And perhaps explain what running towards it means to you.
Sure. So I think people we don't like pain. It's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and like you said, we enjoy living in those kind of, hey, things are great moments. Everything. I'm not in any pain. I'm not in any distress. I'm not in any discomfort. But the only way you're going to grow, the only way you're going to improve, the only way you're going to get better is if you step outside those comfort zones. And we all know this, and do something uncomfortable. I mean, our brains are hardwired to avoid pain and discomfort and to seek pleasure. So, to the brain, the status quo, the way things are right now, hey, it's comfortable, it's familiar, just leave it alone. But and we all do this from time to time. I do this.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's comfortable. I'd rather just sit here and scroll on social media. It's mindless. It doesn't get me anywhere. But it's just it's relaxing for a few minutes, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But one of the jobs I had when I was working was I was a girls' high school basketball coach, and I used to constantly tell my players that they needed to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And
Mm,
pain in our lives is inevitable. And it doesn't have to be, I have cancer. It doesn't have to be any kind of an illness. It could be as simple as you break up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, or the plane you're leaving to go on, vacation ends up getting canceled, or someone else at work gets the job that you believe you deserve. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Suffering depends on what you do with that pain. Do you use it to make you a stronger and more determined individual? Or do you wallow in it and feel sorry for yourself and want other people to feel sorry for you? Having said all that, I'll give you what I do every single day of my life
Please.
to try to deal with that pain. And it's not hard. I think we make life a lot more complicated than we need to sometimes. Every day, do one thing at least that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But if you do those small things every day, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we unexpectedly get let go from our job, we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you will be so much more resilient to handle that pain than those people who never step outside those comfort zones.
So voluntarily putting ourselves through struggle, it just makes us more resilient for when the struggle will happen, or when the big struggle will happen. Right. And again, it sounds so counterintuitive, and people might hear like, what is he on about? But unfortunately, or fortunately, that is the only way to actually become that kind of person, because we all share the same fears.
Yeah.
But what makes it different from someone who overcomes them and someone not? They just don't run away from it. But so yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. On your third truth, that is the one that I had a little bit more trouble understanding. So if you could please walk me through, what do you mean by when you say understanding that you have to leave behind is what you weave in other people's hearts? Did I say correctly?
What you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's your legacy. That's what are you going to leave behind? And you know what, you and I were talking before we started to record about how we never get deep with other people. You know,
Yes.
we're just kind of on the surface. And social media allows us to do that. You know, everything's great, everything's fine, everything's, sunshine and rainbows. Well, we know that that's not true in all our lives. We all have difficulties and things like that. But there's a professor here in the United States at the University of Chicago who does this experiment with his students. He's a psychology professor. And the idea is you go out and you get on a bus, and in 3 questions, you are deep with somebody. So you get on a bus, you sit down next to somebody, and hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. How are you? Question 1. Question 2, what do you do for a living? And I'm just making this up. I'm a doctor. Oh, question 3, have you always wanted to be a doctor? No matter what the person says, however they respond, now you're deep with somebody. It's like, no, I grew up on a farm and I wanted to be a veterinarian, but X, Y, and Z happened. Or, yeah, my mom was a doctor, but she died of cancer when she was 40, so I'm honoring her legacy by becoming a doctor. Whatever they say, now you're deep with them. Now they're telling you why they do what they do with their lives. And Francesco, I've seen so many people, and you probably have too, that feel they're born empty. And that when they get out of school and they get into life, whatever that looks like for them, that then their job is to fill up their empty self. I've got to have the most money, have the greatest job, drive the nicest car, and have all the latest gadgets and gizmos. And what I found is we're not born empty. We're all born full with whatever we need to be successful, however you define that word in your life, already inside us. We just need to take it, pull it out, and use it for our benefit. So our job in life should not be to fill ourselves up, because we'll never get filled. There'll always be one more thing we're chasing, one more thing that
Always.
always. What we need is to, instead of filling ourselves up, empty ourselves out with our unique gifts and talents, certainly for the betterment of ourselves, but also for the betterment of our family, of our friends, and of our community. And when you make that paradigm shift, when you switch your mind from I got to get stuff to what can I give, and I know this, I feel this every day, it's just amazing how much different your life changes.
Right. Right, and especially younger generations strongly believe that life is a single player game and that everything is there to serve them as the main character. But if we all adopted that mindset, it would be the end of civilized society. So we need to think about the impact we're having into the world, the immediate circle around us in society. So what advice would you give to someone younger who doesn't really care about serving others and only thinks about what he or she wants?
I guess I would say this, and if nobody listened to us remembers anything I said through this whole thing, this is probably one of the most important things I'm going to say today.
Okay.
It's more important who you work with and who you work for than it is the work that you do. Find people that care about you, find people that are willing to invest in you, find people that want to see you succeed, and hitch your wagon to those people and climb your mountains together. And there's that old saying that says we're a product of the 5 people we hang around with the most.
Yeah.
So if you're hanging around with people that are smart and are making you smarter, that are financially better off and making you financially better off, that have better friends and are giving you better friends, you're going to be a much better person versus hanging around people where it's all about drama, it's all about negativity, it's all about them. You're going to turn into that kind of person. So wherever you are right now, if you're sitting sort of in the middle right now, where do I go? Do I go for people that make me better, or do I just hang out with these people that are going nowhere in their lives? You will end up being the product of whichever side you go to. There's an old, and apparently this is true. If you took a donkey and you put a donkey that was equally thirsty and equally hungry in the middle between a trough of water and I don't know, a haystack, that donkey would die because it wouldn't be able to make up its mind whether to go for the water or go for the hay. And, and,
Right.
and people are like that. We do that all the time. I don't know which to do. Pick one. Pick one and do it.
That's it. Nice. Nice. No, that's solid, timeless advice, actually. I like it. So, well, then let's move to number 4. Remember that as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. Why do you think people quit as often as they do? It's not that they want to quit. They enter the game confident that they can make it. Quitting is not an option. And yet so many end up quitting.
Yeah, I think people quit because it's hard. Life is hard.
It is,
I mean, when I got cancer, people were like, well, you got cancer. Who do you blame? I'm like, well, what do you mean? Who do I blame? It's like, well, you must blame somebody because you got cancer. And we're big, especially in the West, and I've seen this. I've seen people start down the road toward, starting a business or some goal that they have, and they come up against an impediment. Something blocks their way, and they can't get over it. They can't get around it. They can't get through it, and so they quit. But we just don't quit. Now we got to blame somebody. We got to blame our parents or our station in life or our boss or wherever it is. Very few people take personal responsibility for their own success and happiness. So, I mean, the way this truth kind of resonates with me is that I know at some point the pain of my cancer, my journey is going to end. It may end through surgery, it may end through some new medication that comes on the market. Quite frankly, it may end when I die. But if I quit, if I give up, if I give in to pain, then pain is always going to be a part of my life.
Right. And how do you master the motivation to persist? Even when everything, is difficult and the outlook is grim, even hopeless, like you are about to quit, you don't want to quit, but how do you find that motivation?
Yeah, and that's just it. So we talk about and we hear a lot about motivation. I mean, there's all kinds of books written about it and things like that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Motivation, in my mind and in my experiences in life, is intrinsic. It comes from inside you. Nobody's going to motivate you to do anything. If it doesn't come from you, nobody's going to be able to say, hey, Tery, get out there and do that. Okay. I mean, I remember when I was growing up, my brothers and I have two brothers. We were all college athletes. One of my brothers played professional basketball. And my dad used to come home from work in the summer and he would look at us and like, did you lift weights today? And a lot of times it was, no, I didn't. And my dad wouldn't lecture. He would just look at us and go like, okay, and walk away. And it was, it was the disappointment that we had disappointed our father in not doing what we probably should have done as athletes in our lives. So it's this, we can all be better. We can all, the Navy SEALs, one of the group of the military here in the United States, has a thing called their 40% rule, which basically says, and these are some of the toughest people in the military we have here in the US, which basically says that if you're done, if you're at the end of your rope, if you can't go on, you're only at 40% of your maximum. And you still have another 60% left in reserve to give to yourself. And we also know this through marathon runners. At a certain point, a marathon runner hits what they call the wall. It's like, I can't go on. I don't have any more sugar. I don't have more glucose in my body. I can't keep running. Well, what they find is if you can just keep moving forward, eventually you will get that second wind. Eventually you will be able to keep running. But so many people, when that impediment hits them, is like, no, I'm done. I'm out of it. And so stop blaming people. You've got to motivate yourself. But let me end with this.
Yeah.
There's three things that you need in life, I think, to be successful in anything. One is motivation, and that comes from you. Nobody can do it for you. The second is discipline, and the third is good habits. And I look at those as kind of a stool. If any one of those is not there or you don't have enough of it, that stool is going to be out of balance. So you got to motivate yourself, and if you're highly motivated but have poor habits and aren't disciplined, you're not going to be successful. No. If you're very disciplined but have no motivation and poor habits, you're not going to be. So you need all three of those to be successful in life. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we say, I just need to be motivated. No, you need motivation, the discipline, and the good habits to get where you want to be.
Right. No, I think you hit it on point with that formula. One without the other, you might short term achieve something, give you the illusion that you're going there, but you cannot sustain it. It reminds me, there is the hockey stick chart where on the y-axis you have growth, success, money, whatever you want, and here you have time. And success or growth is not linear, is exponential. So you might be going like this for like 7, 8, 10 years. And you quit right on the point where it goes like this, like a hockey stick. So you might not see progress for so long, but you just gotta keep at it, because then it all goes all of a sudden like a hockey stick. Success, growth, whatever you want is just. So don't quit. People quit at the inflection point. So yeah, what you're saying is absolutely right.
And if you don't mind me just picking up on that, because I
Yeah.
think that's a great point. A lot of times we think life is linear. We start at A and we just get better, and we get to Z. And what I found in my life is that, and I'll use basketball because I was a college basketball player. You would start to work and you'd work really hard, and then you would plateau.
Yeah.
No matter how hard you worked. And then the more you worked, sometimes you'd get worse and you'd go down, and then you'd plateau again. But then maybe you'd get better, and then you'd plateau, and then so we like to think life is linear. If I just start working hard, I'll eventually get to where I want to be. That's not true. You are going to get better, you're going to plateau, you're going to get worse, you're going to get better, you're going to plateau. All of that is part of life. So when you get to that point, it's very important that you don't quit, like you say, Francisco. You've got to keep going forward. You will get to where you want to be more than likely, as long as you're motivated, got good habits, and have the discipline to implement them.
Exactly. Praise. Speaking of motivation, on your book called Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life, on the first chapter, you talk about enjoying life and finding your why, your purpose. I think there is an overall lack of purpose in modern man's heart, and that is for multiple reasons. people walking away from religion, shift on multiple, societal morals changing, over glorification of shallow pursuits, you name it. But let's say there is someone who's reading your book. Again, let's say someone on his early or her early 20s and trying to become a better version of themselves. Why do they need a why? Why do they need to find purpose?
Yeah, I'll go back to Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl's book, where he talks about how, and if anybody, would be an expert on this, would be a guy who was in a concentration camp, during World War II.
Yeah,
He
he
talks
knows.
about, yeah, how we should not live life in the abstract, that every one of us has a purpose for which we've been put on this face of this earth to do. And he goes on to really kind of, I think, challenge us that we have a moral obligation to find our purpose in life and to live it. And so many people don't, I think, because they're afraid. I don't know what my purpose is. So how do you figure out your purpose?
Yeah.
What are you good at? I mean, what gifts and talents do you have that maybe somebody else doesn't? And we all have unique gifts and talents. I'm not very good at math, but as you probably have figured out, I can
I
talk
feel you.
I can talk your ear off, and I can write. So those would be my gifts and talents. What can I do to help the world with my gifts and talents? And the other thing I'll say about this, and I know I've done this, and I'd be interested in hear your thoughts on this too. We tend, as we start out in life, to put these sort of mile markers out there, and we say by the time I'm 28 years old, I want to be making $100,000 a year, and I'm just making this up. And by the time I'm 35 years old, I want to be married and I want to have 2 children, whatever it is. And then as life goes along, we're not making $100,000 a year at 28, and we don't have a family when we're 35. And there's a man here in the United States by the name of Jeff Wetzler, wrote a book called Ask. And he looks at life differently. And I wish I would have heard this when I was younger. He says, look at your life not by those individual mileposts, but look at it as decades. So in your 20s, do everything. If there's anything that remotely interests you, do it. Make mistakes, screw up, make all kinds of errors in your 20s. And then in your 30s, find those 2 or 3 things that you really are passionate about. Maybe it's having a family, maybe it's starting a business, whatever it ends up being. And then in your 40s, when you're more mature, when you understand how life works, when you're more established, find that one thing, that one why in your life, and dig into it. And then he says in your 50s and 60s and beyond, you can reap the benefits, you can reap the rewards of what you did in your 20s, 30s, and 40s.
I think you're absolutely right. I was listening to Tony Robbins morning, and he was saying exactly that, how we have life comes in seasons, and you need to understand in which season you are. And sometimes you want the rewards of a season which you're not. So it's just understanding where you are, in which season you are of your age, and in which season you are in the world. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Many of us want the money today, we want the career today, we want the promotion today, but we forget that there is a process to go through for you to become the person to deserve those things.
And the other thing I'll say about this is you have to enjoy the grind. You have to enjoy the work that you're doing. If you're just chasing money, you'll be chasing it forever because you don't know what your values are. In the absence of understanding your values, your default is always going to be, I want more money. Understand what your values are in life and chase those things as part of your work. Chase your values as part of your work. And I don't think people do that. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about. If I get a lot of money, then I'm going to be happy. I promise you, you will not be happy if the only thing you have in your life is money. It's much more important to have, I think, I have a very strong faith in God, and I'm not going to push that on anybody, but you've got to be part of something that's bigger than yourself, I think, to be self-actualized in your life.
Right. Right. So the person, how does the saying goes? The person who loves walking will go further than the person who loves the destination.
Yeah.
So that's what you said. You gotta love the grind.
Yeah.
But since you mentioned faith, I was gonna ask you, what part has religion played in you finding your purpose, and how can, in general, how can religion contribute in finding one's purpose?
Yeah, I believe that we're all put here for a reason. That we're just not. And I know a lot of people who feel like we came from nothing, nothing's going on when we're here, and we go to nothing. So life has really no meaning. And I don't believe that at all. I
Mhm.
believe that our creator, however you define creator in life, put us here for a reason. There's a reason that I am here and I'm still here. And I was diagnosed in 2012 with terminal cancer and told I'd be dead in 2 years. And I was initially put on a medication called interferon, where I took a weekly injection that gave me terrible flu like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after those injections. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having a terrible case of the flu every week for 5 years.
Oh
And that,
man.
that was not a cure. That was just, as my doctor used to say, we're kicking the can down the road. And Francisco, there was a time during that period where I prayed to die. I was like, I'm not living, I'm just not dying. And I asked God to take me out of that. Obviously, He didn't. He kept me here for a reason. And then in 2020, I had my leg amputated and I have tumors in my lungs. I still have tumors in my lungs, which I'm treated for. And I remember my doctor showed me my CAT scan. And I have no medical background. I don't know how to read a CAT scan. But you could kind of look at it and be like, oh, well, that sure doesn't look like it belongs there. You know, I had these big tumors in my
Yeah.
lungs. I had fluid all around the pleural spaces in my lungs. And I remember looking at my doctor and saying, how was I alive? And until the day I die, I'll never forget this. He put his head down, he shook his head no, and then he looked up at me and he said, I don't know, because you shouldn't have been. Which said to me that God's not done with me yet. I mean, we all have gifts and talents. Figure out your gifts and talents and apply them to different things. Again, go back to your 20s. Just do stuff. Figure stuff out. Eventually, if you keep doing it long enough, you'll come upon your purpose. You'll come upon that this is what I'm supposed to do with my life, because you'll feel it. You'll feel it in your heart, you feel it in your mind, and you'll feel it in your soul.
Wow. Wow. Well, well, what can I say to that? I have nothing to add. That was powerful. That was, and yeah, it's so nice that you found your purpose, and you're out there and helping people out with what you say. Because sometimes it just takes someone to say what we've been telling ourselves for a long time for us to understand. But sometimes we just need that outside perspective to validate, what we already believe. And I think you're doing a good job, man. I think you're
Thank
doing
you.
a good job.
I appreciate it.
So, on finding your passion, your purpose, what are some steps, either in forms of thinking or mental rehearsal, or in practical tools that someone can take to find the passion? I know you said go back in your 20s and try as many things as you can, but let's say you're in your 40s or mid 30s and you're lost. What are some actionable steps to just get started to find your passion?
And I'll say this: I would tell you not to find your passion, but I would tell you to bring it with you wherever you go. And
Okay.
and the reason I say that is because there's a difference between purpose and passion. And purpose is why you're here. And passion is what you bring to that. I'm excited. I can't wait to get up in the morning. I can't wait to go and do this.
Mm.
And and so I think, a lot of times, especially you hear commencement speakers, at graduation say, follow your passion. Don't follow your passion. Bring it with you everywhere you go. Don't get me wrong. Be a passionate person. But I would say this. I would say, first of all, know what your values are. Know what's foundational, what's bedrock for you that you can anchor your life to. Figure that out first. And then once you understand your values, then figure out what your unique gifts and talents are. What are you good at? What do you enjoy doing? What is somebody else, as you look around with your friends group or your classmates or whatever, something that you're good at that the rest of them aren't? And then, so values, understanding what you're good at, and then try stuff. Just jump in the water. I'm going to tell you another story. There's a man here by the name of Jesse Itzler, and he's married to a
I know
woman.
him. I know
You
him.
know Itzler? Okay. And he's married, his wife is Sarah Blakely.
Yeah.
And Sarah Blakely, for the audience who don't know this, she started a women's undergarment company called Spanx. And it's a 100 million plus company. It's huge.
Yeah.
But Itzler tells this story about his wife. He said when she started that company, she had one prototype and $5,000. That's it. That's all she had. And she had been a facsimile salesperson prior to starting Spanx. We don't even use faxes anymore. His comment was if she would have waited until she understood human resources, marketing, legal, manufacturing, distribution, he said, I guarantee you somebody else would have come up with that idea and run with it. So his point was, wherever you are, you're in your 20s, you're in the 30s, or in your 40s, know your values, know what you're good at, and then find something you're interested in and jump in. Jump in with both feet. Figure it out as you go along. What people don't understand is it's not when you get to the top of the mountain when you're successful. What life is about is that journey getting to the top of the mountain. Don't miss the journey.
Right. Right. Taking imperfect action. That's what I got from the last part because that's where I find myself at the moment. I've just started something that I know nothing about. I don't know how I'm doing. It's out of my comfort zone. But it just taking that imperfect action, having a terrible first video, then doing it again, and you enjoy as long as you're enjoying doing it and you have that intrinsic motivation, you just persist and something good will come out of it.
Yeah, you're absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, the first time I did a podcast, I started a speaking business. COVID hit, everything shut down. Nobody was doing anything virtually or in person. And a friend of mine reached out and said, "Would you like to be a guest on my podcast?" And I said, "Sure." What's a podcast? I had absolutely no idea what a podcast was. And he explained it to me. And I said, okay, I'll try it. And Francisco, I was horrible. I was terrible. I posted notes all around the camera. He'd ask me a question and I'd kind of lean in and read one of the posted notes. I was terrible. I was horrible at it. But I liked it. And I thought back then after the podcast, I thought, well, I provided no value to that audience whatsoever. But the first time I drove a car, I wasn't any good at it.
Right.
I mean, the first time I cooked a meal, I think I burned the water. The first time I studied algebra, I wasn't any good at it. But could I get good at it? And I remember I was talking to my publisher and I said, Scott, I listened to every podcast I've been on, and I'm probably approaching 700 podcasts that I've been a guest on around the world. And I said, because I want to be a better guest. And he's like, no, Tery, it's not about being good. It's just about not sucking. And I said, well, thanks for the title of my next book, Just Don't Suck. But no, that's not what it's going to be. But I said, no, I want to be good so that the host feels it was time well spent and the audience feels that they got something out of it. So that's, like I said, I was terrible the first time I did this. I didn't have good stories. I didn't have good points. I didn't have anything.
Yeah.
But I learned and I tried to get better every single time.
Right. I want to go back a little bit. You mentioned values. And I'm 29 years old now. And only on the last year, I'm finding myself that values are becoming important. So up until 28 years old, it meant nothing to me. And let's say I'm an 18-year-old about to go out into the world by myself, and everyone online is telling me about money is the most important thing. I should only focus on making money, regardless of how I do it. But you are telling me now, Tery, that I should focus on finding my values instead. Like, why do I even need values? Like, why should I do that and not to do whatever is out there on the internet, So what would you say to that 18-year-old kid?
I would say that coming from an old man, and I am an old man, that values are your foundation. They're your rock. There's something that you can hook your life to that they're not going to move based on what society says or what society does. They are for you foundational. They are who you are, and it doesn't matter what happens. It's just they're that important to you. They are the things in your life that you would be willing to give your life for. So is it your family? Is it your faith? Is it love? Is it, grinding out something you absolutely enjoy doing? Whatever those things, what in your life are you willing to give your life for? That's what your values are. And you need them, because if you don't, every time the pendulum swings to a different way, you're going to move in that direction. And values ground you, so that when the pendulum moves to something that you don't necessarily believe in, you don't have to go with that. It's like, no, I'm going to be my own person because I know what's important in my life.
Nice, nice. I agree with you, and I think values are the anchor that keeps us grounded, as you say. Personally, whenever I've had enough with the world, or whenever I retreat into my solitude, I now go, but I have a list. I've listed down my values. I've written them down, and of course, the values will change because you grow, and hopefully, your values will grow with you. And just by having those values written down, and when in solitude, just really thinking through, it helps me so much. Just um, shuffle through the clutter of who did I meet with? Why did I spend my time doing that thing? Why am I talking to these kind of people? And it's been so helpful that I only wish I've written them down, or I come up with values much earlier, to be fair, because me, as I believe many of, if not all of us, actually have wasted many years, which we hope we could have done something more with ourselves.
Yeah, but as long as you're learning, yeah, I mean, you can look back and say, I wasted that year or that decade or whatever, and that's okay. Did you
That's
learn
okay.
something from it? And if you learn something, can you apply that to where you're going? Either where you are now, or somewhere down the line, can you apply that? We all make mistakes. I
Yeah,
mean, if we don't make mistakes, you're not trying. You're not growing. You're not learning. I mean, again, why would I go to basketball practice? So that I could avoid those mistakes in the game. That's why we practice. I mean, that's what we do every day. We go out and we practice so that we can have a better life down the road. I think, yeah, it's life is amazing, but you
it
got
is.
to know what's important in your life. You got to know what's, as you said, what is that anchor that keeps you grounded in your life?
Right. Okay. So on chapter 3 of your book, you you mention on how people's idea of an extraordinary life, and perhaps their idea of self-worth as well, is attached to their careers, their houses, the money they have in the bank, or the neighborhood they live in. What would be a better frame for someone to adopt and replace those beliefs of what an extraordinary life looks like?
Yeah, there's a great story that I think illustrates this, and it's more of a fable. I don't think this actually happened, but it has to do with Alexander the Great, one of the greatest conquerors probably of all
Hmm.
times. And supposedly, as Alexander the Great is dying, he gathers his counselors around him and he says, "All right, I know I'm dying. I want you to carry out my final three wishes. The first wish is that I want only my doctors to carry my coffin to the grave. The second wish is I want the road to the cemetery paved with gold and silver and precious stones. And the third wish is I want my hands hanging outside my coffin." And one of his counselors steps forward and says, "Excuse me, you're Alexander the Great. You're the most powerful man in the world. You can have any wish you want. Why these three wishes?" He said, "Well, number one, I want only my doctors to carry my coffin to the grave because I want people to understand that no doctor cures anybody. They just help the body to cure itself. So be very
Mm,
careful how you live your life, how you eat, how you exercise, who you associate with, how much sleep you get, etc." Secondly, he said, "I want the road to the cemetery paved with gold and silver and precious stones because I want people to understand that I spent my entire life accumulating wealth and power and money and influence, and yet none of that comes with me after I die." And the third wish about keeping his hands outside his casket or his coffin is that I came into this world empty handed and I leave it the same way. So you can have as much power, influence, money. The bottom line is you're going to be in a plot in the ground right next to the pauper who had absolutely nothing. We all get the same thing. A good life, should also mean a good death. And the reward or the benefit of living, loving, and learning is that we get to die. And so many people are afraid of that. And the Stoic philosophers used to talk about the Latin phrase memento mori, remember death. Remember that you are going to die, not for the sake of death, but for the sake of living, for the sake of finding those values, finding that purpose, and living it in your life. That's what's really important in life.
Do you find yourself facing your own mortality? As in, in your mind, is it something that you have like as a practice so that it kind of motivates you to live a more full life?
It does. I mean, I think all of us should have sort of death sort of in our peripheral vision. We're not focused on it, but
Yeah.
it's kind of sitting out here. And when I had my leg amputated and I found out I had these tumors in my lungs, I went with my wife to the mortuary and to the cemetery and to the church, and I planned my funeral. And because I come on podcasts and I speak in person about motivation and the need to keep moving forward, I actually got some brushback from people who commented that somehow planning my funeral was in some way defeatist. And I had to remind these folks that the last time I checked, we're all going to die. As far as I
Yeah.
know, nobody's working on a cure for life right now. Every one of us is going to die, but not every one of us is going to truly live. And I heard a Native American Blackfoot proverb years ago that I absolutely love, and it goes like this: when you were born, you cried, and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for.
That's powerful, man. Especially we all gonna die, but not many of us will live.
Yeah,
I do think that's very, very true.
it is.
And many of us we not get to live because we are afraid.
Right.
And most of the time, this fear comes from fear of other people's judgments on our life and fear of failure. Now, personally, it took me a long time, and only in the last couple of years of my life, I truly understand the importance of failure, especially in success. But I want to ask your thoughts on how to overcome this fear of failure and what distinguishes those who overcome it from those who don't.
I don't ever want to overcome my fear of failure. I want to constantly, I mean, I want to constantly be willing to fail, because when I fail, I can learn something. And so I don't ever want to, yes, people have, what happens if I fail? And I know I've done this. Most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. No, I've done that in my life plenty of times. Wanted to start a business, wanted to get involved in a project, even with my doctor. Are we going to do this treatment or things like that? That fear is always going to be there. Fear is one of those things, and I've said this my whole life. I've not done things because I've been afraid. What will people think about me if I fail? Do I have enough information? Do I know enough? You get to that point where you stop yourself because you're not thinking with your mind, you're thinking with your fears and your insecurities. And whenever I get an opportunity, especially to speak to young people, I always tell them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you feel you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then
Exactly.
it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Exactly. Is that I think Jordan Peterson was the one who I've heard this from. The definition of courage is not being afraid of things, is being afraid of things and doing the things anyway. So someone who's courageous is the person who just runs towards the fear and does the thing anyway, no matter the outcome.
Yeah, I mean, what do they say? A hero is somebody who's braver for 5 minutes longer than everybody else. Same kind of thing. You, yeah, we're all afraid.
Yeah.
But if you have just this much grit, just a little bit of grit, you can go so much further than all those people that kind of hold back and be like, no, I'm afraid. What happens if you feel, what's the worst thing? And I think if you want to overcome fear, ask yourself this one question. What's the worst thing that could happen to me if I fail at this? Somebody will laugh at me. Somebody will write an article that says I'm an idiot or whatever is. And if you can live with that, if you're like, okay, people are going to laugh at me, I can live with that, then go ahead and do it. You're only going to grow by doing things that are difficult, that you don't know about. Like, you mentioned you started new things. I don't know anything about this. When I did my first podcast, I didn't know anything about this. Everything in life, nobody knew anything about it at the first, the outset of it. So be one of those. Maybe you're going to find the cure for cancer. Maybe you're going to cure me. But if you don't start, if you don't get off the block, if you don't get out of bed and say, I'm going to do something with my life today, I can't imagine at the end of my life standing in front of my creator and saying, okay, God, you gave me all these gifts and talents and I didn't do anything with it. I didn't make this world a better place. Why can't we, take religion out of it. Here's your gifts and talents. Make the world a better place. Leave this world a better place than you came in. 100 years from now, nobody's going to care about
Exactly.
that you and I were here. But what I want people, I hope today, are those relationships, those connections with other human beings. Make their lives, make their worlds a better place.
Right. And what a much fuller life that would be than just watching Netflix and just scrolling on your phone, but to actually have an impact. I mean, it's not even about regrets, it's about the quality of your life on your day to day. It's just a waste. Just a waste. But I can't help to think of someone who is in the 50s and thinks, what if I'm too old to fail? I've been living, I've known a way of living for my whole 55 years. I have a wife, I have 5 kids, I have these responsibilities. What if I'm too old to fail? What if I take this endeavor, but I have so many responsibilities? How am I going to sacrifice? Maybe that person doesn't have the money on the side to, it's a real risk. So how about these people? Like, isn't the fear of failure maybe justified? And how do they overcome that mindset? Like, oh, I'm too old to fail. What do you think on that?
I would tell you to go Google, just get on Google or whatever search engine you use and type in people who started, I'll say companies later in life. And you'll come up with a whole list of people like Colonel Sanders. I don't know. Kentucky Fried Chicken is a big franchise here in the United States.
Was he like in the 80s or 70s or
He retired from his job and then started Kentucky Fried Chicken. I mean, there are all kinds of people that are out there that Whistler's mother was a painter, started painting when she was like 70, and became a world famous, world renowned painter. Why does age is just a number? I mean, it's again, wherever you are, start. Now, granted, if you're a family person, if you've got responsibilities and things like that, I would say start smartly. I mean, don't just quit your job and say, I'm going to go do this. I would get the buy-in for your family, figure out how you're going to do it. But if it's something you want to do bad enough, if it's something that really interests you in your life, like I said, at the end of your life, you're not going to regret the things that you did. You're going to regret those things that you didn't do. And when I die, I don't want to be that person who has those regrets. I mean, they always say that the richest real estate in the world are cemeteries because they're areas rich in businesses never started, books never written, and relationships never pursued. When you go to the cemetery, don't have any of those regrets. Just start. It doesn't matter how old you are. I don't care if you're 70. Start. Oh, sorry, I want to paint. Oh, I want to get my guys together and, go to the coffee shop every Tuesday morning and just shoot the breeze with them. Whatever it ends up, it doesn't have to be something big in life. Do those little things, and I promise you'll have a much better life.
Right. Just you can just do things. It's like we forget it. You can just do things. We are so caught up in one way of living that we forget the endless possibilities out there. And I think there's a big fault of my generation, at least, that we think in we cannot think in decades. We only think in short term. And we only think, how can I be the CEO of whatever company? How can I be the next best-selling author in 2 years when I'm 32? And most of these people, as we talked about before, when it comes to the seasons of your life, most of these people became successful in the reaping season, which is 40s to 60s. But this is how we just want the immediate gratification. And it has to do a lot with social media and dopamine and how we condition ourselves to want things immediately. But yeah, it's about adopting that mindset of planning decades, and it's never too late. If you start now, even if in 20 years you make it, you still make it. And it's redefining this, what success looks like. People think success, oh, if I'm a millionaire by 40, why do I even want to be a millionaire by 40? Like, what's the point? Oh, I cannot party or cannot. It's like, no, it's about redefining what success is for you, and just start.
Yeah. I mean, I love the quote. Usain Bolt, one of the fastest men in the world, had a great quote. Runs the 100-meter dash. And he said, I spent 4 years learning to run 9 seconds. And so many people give up on their dreams after just a few months. I mean, think about that. I spent 4 years learning to run 9 seconds.
Wow.
9 seconds. 4 years. That's how much time you gave to running 9 seconds. And people give up on their dreams after a few months. Why?
Wow. Wow. Yeah, it puts everything into perspective. All right, Tery, last question. What do you want to be remembered for?
Like I said, 100 years from now, nobody's going to remember I was here, so I have no interest in being remembered. But what I would like to be remembered for today is those relationships, those connections that I have with other human beings. I love people. I'm fascinated by them. I am, like you, Francesco, curious. Why do people do what they do? Why do people think the way they think? Because I think I can always learn from those people. I want to die learning. So I hope it's the relationships that I have with other human beings.
Nice. Love it. Thank you, Tery. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it.